Right, big moment. Factorio Space Age is out. This is important. This, firstborn child, marriage, all of that stuff. Pah, this is important. In life, a man should have his priorities correctly aligned. The fact that Factorio, the greatest game ever created, maybe next to Eve, is now has an expansion, and from what I could tell, it's one of the biggest expansions I've ever seen. So I'm going to use this video now. I've seen a lot of other YouTubers starting at the beginning. I'm not going to do that. I'm literally starting at the end. I've spent, since Factorio Space Age came out, I've actually spent the last 2 weeks, week and a half, 2 weeks building a Megabase. And I haven't gone into space. I've put a space platform up in space just because I clicked the button accidentally. But other than that, we've not done anything. And on this video, this is the foundation. This is the basis we are going to build our House of Awesomeness on. And I wanted to kind of show you really what this game is, because to be honest with you, I think it's a masterpiece. And I don't say that very often, but I do think Factorio Space Age could well be a masterpiece. And we'll go through what are the various 5 classifications needed to certify a masterpiece, but I think this certainly merits it. So let me give you an overview of what I've done. So I quite like city blocks. I find them quite easy. I think it's a bit of faff up front to build your blueprints. Now, you had to rebuild all your blueprints in this because the railway system, for example, now has legacy rails, which may be removed from the game at some point. So I don't know if you know that, but if you do have a legacy base using legacy blueprints, even if you started anew and you've got a legacy railway, you might want to just double check that, because it might be that one day they disappear. I think it's a more, let's say, friendly rail system, not as, let's say, easy to get around. So your actual turning circles are higher in this. But it works. It's quite nice. And I've spent a fair bit of time building blueprints basically from scratch. I don't think I actually brought over any of my old playthrough blueprints at all, and I've created everything new. So hence why it took weeks to get to this point, because I wanted to build a city block that truly was completely printable. So, setting up the box correctly so that you can basically plop it down every time. And I'm really glad I did that, because the foundation I feel I now have sets me up for Space Age. I've heard an awful lot of cautionary tales that basically if you go into space too quickly, you don't necessarily defend your base properly from the biter expansion, yada yada yada. It means that you might one day be unable to basically change or recover your old, Nauvis base. So for me, I think it's been something that I'm really quite passionate about, getting a completely autonomous defended base that has, everything is automated. So let me give you an example. If things get damaged in the mining outposts, there's a train that will go and deliver stuff, and drones that will do their job. So for me, this has worked quite well. And you can see here, we've started our space platform. The purpose of this video really was to create the basis of that platform. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, let me just give you the elevator pitch. I'm making a pair of space boobs, and that's all you need to know. That is the game. You can make anything, and in this case, boobs in space. The reason I did that is I have this weird mentality that the space science is white, and therefore it's milk. So it's booby milk. There you go. That's the level of my maturity. And I've got a mortgage. Good Lord, that frightens me to think that. Anyway, so the purpose, I think, of Space Age is obviously to go into space, but it's also to kind of really automate much more. So Factorio is famous for being an incredibly automatable game. It really is a programmer's game. I can say with true, belief that I don't think there's many games out there that reward you for having a programmer's mindset, or even just a data-driven mindset. A lot of people create spaghetti bases because they're not necessarily thinking how to automate. They're more interested in progression, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that's how I played for a long time. I now play this game with a view to try and make it as efficient and almost autonomous as possible. I've always loved that kind of style of play. So in the process of building that mega base, I've actually gone and built 3 bases in a row now, and I'm slowly dismantling the second base that I created to basically move completely to a city block where you have the ability, trains deliver everything. So there's a complete sort of delivery of trains there. And learning how the space platforms work, I think, has been a really wonderful experience as well, because you're grabbing rocks out of space, you're turning them into new components. Whoa, what does that mean? It just feels overwhelming, to be honest. So I think the learning curve on this again has been extreme, and I think I like games like that. Really, anything that's like a puzzle that really gets your brain thinking, I think is wonderful. So I've thoroughly enjoyed that, and we're going to talk through that. So what basically this video, kind of where we begin here, is we have the old base being dismantled, and I'm slowly doing that using bots, and you can see everything now is transitioned towards what you see here. It's effectively a grid structure that uses, each grid will create something. So some things could just be as simple as foundries. So trains deliver ore, it's get turned into plate, and then trains pick up that plate and move it then to the next stage. I've tried to keep it that way because the way that I think this, that kind of style of play works quite well is, and as you start to scale, you then have to worry less about things. So every single city block has a different function. So some things are producing circuits, the green chips, red chips, blue chips. Some is just doing science. Now, some things are very small. So red science and green science, you may or may not know, is very straightforward, very simple. So you can just put them in one city block. But some things like green science, not green science, yellow science, I think it was, or is it purple? They are very complicated. So it's better to put them somewhere a bit different. And then it starts a different kind of game. All of a sudden the game moves away from spaghetti and trying to build things to the efficiency of it. And I think a lot of players never get to that point. If you look at the achievements, the simple fact that so many players of this game have never even put a rocket into space means they probably gave up, but they got what they wanted from the game. It entertained them, and then they moved on. For me, I've always enjoyed trying to take this to really the nth degree. I don't think on Steam there is one game that I've played more time in than this. The close exceptions could be Project Zomboid. I played that like crazy. Eve thankfully doesn't capture on Steam how long I play, because I think that would be years of my life playing Eve online. And I think the only other contender I think is Ark. Now, I love Ark. We'll talk about Ark for just a very quick moment. It's a wonderful game. If you've never played it, please do keep an eye out for it when it's on the Steam sale, because I don't think there's any game quite like it out there. But for me, these are games that you just invest huge amounts of time into building things. I think that's the subtext of what I've learned from this, is I love to build things. And I would say the beauty of some of these games is really trying to, really put your stamp on it. So with the space platform, this is a whole new learning experience for me. This is, I don't really actually understand, or I didn't understand at the start of it, why am I capturing rocks and what am I doing with them? Why would I be making materials in space? It's only when you start to then actually travel to the other planets, you start to realize that not only do you need to fuel a platform stroke ship, a plat ship, let's call it, but you actually need to make it sustainable. Now, this is where, that sounds straightforward, right? But it's when it starts to get into, you're grabbing 3 different materials from space. You're grabbing 3 rocks that essentially give you carbon, steel, and ice, right? Now, what's interesting is your entire logistical system has to accommodate for the fact that you'll get them in odd quantities. So you probably need more ice than you need steel. Now, what's really interesting even further than that is you can't put chests everywhere, things to store things. It has to be stored in this central space platform hub. Post in the comments if I got that wrong, but that's certainly my understanding so far. So as you see this here, I'm trying to just make simple science here, which is where you grab the rocks out of space, you crush them into those 3 different things, you turn one into iron plates, you use the carbon from the other one, and you turn the other one, I think the other one is just an ice block. And to make space science, booby milk science, you effectively need to have those 3 things. Now, this, when it starts to get interesting, is when the overwhelm of it happens. So there's too much iron. So what you have to start doing is jettisoning any surplus iron. Now, you could just do that and it would be a lot of clicks for you to do, but the way you should play this game is you should automate that. And this is when it suddenly clicked to me that that's actually a wonderful thing you have to do. And I've done that in many mods. Many of the mods of this game, like space exploration, this is heavily sort of leaned upon. You have to understand flow through how to kind of set up the kind of right logistical chain to do this. And what I think really worked really well was the effectively creating that logistical system. So if this, then that. So if you've ever done Excel, you'll know the if statements. You do that here. So, and I know that sounds so boring. I get it. Trust me, I get it. It sounds boring, but it's satisfying as heck when you've done it. So within that factory unit, what you would be doing is, and all I did just to begin with, was make a simple command that said, if you get more than 100 iron ore, just use, then this little arm here will activate and pull out anything over 100 and jettison it into space. Now, hopefully some of you have just had a eureka moment there, that it is as simple as that. You can just set up a simple structure of a belt and an arm, and that means you're never going to then have the problem of clicking every time. That in its simplest form is why I think I love this game, because you can do so much. You can get so clever with it that you can just basically make the entire world yours. An example here, I think, is really trying to make a platform that is completely autonomous, so you don't have to really mess with it. You even then can automate what things go to it and what things come back from it. So if you wish to, you could just have a mining colony in space that is just constantly feeding back to you iron ore. I mean, that sounds as simple as it is incredibly useful, because you can then scale that up. I mean, again, if you build a very big platform with many grabbing arms, then you're going to be pulling in an awful lot of materials. So that in its simplest form, when I first saw that, I was just like a drunken child, if that's a thing. I was just like, yes, I want this. I want to play this now. So this is why I didn't rush to space, because I knew that if I did, I'd be constantly bumping my head against what I don't have. And I think that would have really annoyed me, because I want to make sure I get the most out of this game. So this kind of video here, that what you're seeing me doing here, is really starting to experiment on what more I can do with this platform. And it's very basic at the moment. I promise you the end result is much better than what you see there. This was me, I guess, learning how on earth am I going to do this, because it was completely new mechanics. And I think the simple fact that there was an infinite, well, more or less an infinite supply of materials to this place gave me confidence that I actually now could focus on it. And I think that's the key thing really, is don't rush. I've seen an awful lot of people rush this particular game, and they've then suffered. So people have soft locked on certain planets because they're kind of stuck there. And I think this is why, you know, a little bit of careful planning, a little bit of preparation is definitely worth it. And I'll give you an example, because you can go to another planet, and then once you're on that planet, you don't take your things with you. As best I understand it, that's not how it works. You take your suit, and that's it, and your guns. But you don't take inventory, so you can't just take 100 construction robots, an entire base basically in your inventory. You have to then kind of begin again and start that process. Post in the comments if I've got that wrong, because that was certainly my understanding. And what I can see is that many means that you then have to think about how you're going to do this. But this is where the scale of the game becomes something really beautiful, because what you can do is effectively build a supply ship. So you can, again, I love this, you could have a supply ship basically accepting lots of certain materials, lots of certain equipments, and then they will be delivered to orbit of the new planet and then just drop it down to you. And that's certainly what I'm going to try. I think you'll see as this series of videos, because yes, this is going to be a series. I love this game with just complete and utter reckless abandon. It is, to me, one of the finest games ever made. And I think the key sort of thing for me to get from this game is that feeling of not rushing it, taking your time. Like fine wine or a beautiful woman, you should take your time and enjoy it. And that sounds really creepy and weird. I didn't mean it to come out like that, but you should enjoy the company of that sort of, wonderful thing. And I think this is where things like Factorio, I think to me, are just sort of, games designed to kind of, switch off. I've always been asked why, because, I'm of a certain age, and a lot of people say to me, what do you do for your hobbies and that? And I have the usual wanky ones like, oh, I run, I go to the gym. I quite enjoy mountain biking. I quite enjoy, automobiles and so on. But my kind of biggest thing I will always say is I love computer games, and people look at you as if you've literally just, you know, taken your manhood out and waved it around, and it's, you know, they look in horror at the fact that, you know, adults play computer games. And I think we're getting away from that. Post in the comments if you have similar instances of that, because I do feel now people are sort of waking up to the fact that this is just entertainment, and it's no different to watching a film. It's just a film that you control. And I do think there's, unfortunately, an awful lot of people, sadly, who don't see it that way. They see it as, oh, you play games, what, like on your phone or something? And it's like, no, I have a gaming PC. And again, if you say gaming PC to some people, you might as well just ask for the door to be slammed in your face. And I think, you know, we need to get beyond that sort of perception, because I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with gaming. In fact, I would say everything I have in my life, I owe to gaming, because it taught me how to talk to people. You know, I was part of a huge alliance. I ran corporations and alliances in my time. And you learn how to talk to different people that don't believe what you believe. And, you know, some people are quite questionable in their ethics and morals. But that's fine, because you have to accept that it's a bit of a box of chocolates, as someone once said. And I think that's my point, is gaming to me is something that teaches you a huge amount of additional life skills. You know, my job in the city that I can't talk about because of legal proceedings was massively boosted by the fact that I learned Excel, the fact that I learned data analysis, the fact that I could talk to very aggressive different people from all around the world. You know, that experience of running an EVE Alliance was a wonderful example of how, you know, you can benefit from it. So these things are really cool. And I think, you know, when you look at a game like, I don't know, Call of Duty, not that there's anything wrong with Call of Duty, love it. It's very different to like a Factorio or an EVE or, you know, even an ARC, because they actually, to me, they actually kind of teach you different things. They teach you skills and so on. So there you go. That's my kind of pitch to why games like Factorio are awesome. So let's talk about Factorio a bit more. So you've probably wondered what I'm doing in the background here. Very early on, I was aware that you're not going to be on Nauvis for a huge amount of time after a certain point in the game. So what I decided to do was to kind of pull out my kind of best designs that I could think of and really build something completely autonomous. So we have a defensive structure here that is by city block, and they're independent. So you see each has its own oil stop. One of the things I haven't built here is things like ammo drops, because you don't need it, because the drones will do that. But in the distant kind of, outposts, they do have some, you know, ability to get all the different things you'll need, like walls, you know, power lines, you know, miners and so on. And you see here, it's basically every single city block has its own stop for light oil, so therefore the flame throwers will always be fueled. Those stations switch off, again, once they've reached a certain amount of capacity. So once they have enough oil, they will switch off. So again, it's all that wonderful thing of automation. I do highly recommend it if you don't do it. And it can feel overwhelming, but I think there's some amazing YouTube channels out there, certainly not this one, who can help you with that learning. I mean, Neolaus is wonderful because he really explains, he takes the time and explains what he's doing. And I do think there's some stuff, I'll probably post in the comments some of the other sort of channels that I'd highly recommend, because this game really does have a learning curve with it, that if you're willing to watch a few videos of it, you can learn quite a bit from it. I won't try and do that because I'm not the best at sort of explaining how I'm doing certain things. Some things I just get off the internet. I just go and create, or just go to factorioblueprints.com, I think it is, factorioprints.com. And I just literally take a copy of something and drop it in. But when it comes to circuit conditions and things like that, there's just type in Factorio circuit conditions and you'll see some wonderful videos. And I would recommend them, you know, just put them on while you're playing, you know, minimize the window, or if you, like I do, play in a window, and you can basically then just, you can learn how to do certain things. And start small. So with simple stuff, start with, making, I don't know, some of the automated train stops, for example. One of the things I quite like doing is not having trains run if there's no need to. So with certain mining outposts, you set their cargo to a wire. So you build a wire all along the cargo the cargo, whatever you call them, chests. and you connect that to the station and only make the station enabled when a certain number is hit. I do think that's a good way of doing it. So anyway, have a look. Here we go. So I'm actually now reducing the boobs. We're having a boob reduction. And it's because I realized that the grabbers, so grabbing boobs, I mean, it's literally all there. It's just wonderful. Grabbing boobs, making milk, is not going to work. So I decided that probably at this point to make a proper space platform and try and work it out. So let's go through what I'm doing here. So every space platform, it's not a ship. Think of it as like a moving barge. I quite like that thought. And I think actually in reality, that's probably what real humans will do once we get to that point, is we probably won't make, capsules. We won't have planes in space. You'll have oil rigs in space that will basically fly around. And we'll use gravity to guide us. So you won't have giant jet engines really. You'll have boosters and boost rockets and so on that will just push us towards a very, very well calculated and double checked trajectory to somewhere. But the benefit of doing such is, as you see here, you could even do mining. You could literally do things with that platform that you can't do with a ship. Post in the comments, let me know if you think that's true or not. But for me, I do think the simple utility of this is that, yes, we're going to build an oil rig in space. I love that. I absolutely love the concept of it. And I think this is why it's such a different concept. It's a different game, because in space exploration, if you played that mod, this is heavily based on, this is the next generation of that mod, for example. You built ships, and I always thought that it was a bit janky. It was the one part of the mod I didn't like, because they weren't ships. They were just, platforms that move. And I like that this game has said, no, we're not really going to build ships in this game. What we'll do is we'll build platforms that you'll actually use to go to places. And I just love it. And this is actually slightly older footage. I think I'm doing this sort of voiceover about a week after I did this footage. Because where I've gone to in this particular playthrough is we've taken these platforms, these stations, to another level, which is starting to build them into ships, and you know what I mean, things that move, oil rigs in space. And I think as I've done that, I've been really thoroughly enjoying the mechanics, because it's all the things that I think the mods gave us. So for example, there was a wonderful mod which was mine everything, I think it was called, but basically every single square inch of the planet was a mineral, and it was a randomized mineral. So you really had to get good at how you filter the various things that come out. And that's what I'm doing here. So each of these grabbers can be set to do a certain type of material, but I don't want it to do that, because I'd rather it just grab everything. I then decide what I keep and get rid of any surplus. And I think because it's an infinite supply of material, that's the way you should probably do this, because it's about, I need X number of these three things. Once I've got more than that, just jettison the excess to space, because I don't need it anymore. And I think that's certainly a great, I like the idea of that. I think it starts to, it creates an entirely different logistical challenge. And I know already here what I'm doing is I'm having issues then of each of these grinders. The grinders have a chance to not fully grind one of the materials. So you have to then put a feedback loop to put it back into the grinder to then try again. This is such a wonderful mechanic. I mean, I'm genuinely impressed with all of these things, because it just adds a level of complexity that at first you're going to be like, why does it do that? That's so annoying. It's really stupid. It should not eject the material until it's literally taken everything. And the fact that it does that, I think, just means that you have to get better at the game. You have to learn what is the best way to handle this. So with each of these, I've built these little feedback loops. In the end, I actually decided it's better to treat the central storage area as a giant can, and then have logic that basically says, okay, so I need this number of rocks and this number of materials. Once it goes above that, just jettison anything that's not needed. And I found that incredibly useful. So this little spaghetti that you're seeing here, this doesn't last long, because the reality is, it's not particularly fit for purpose. But again, you have to play the game to learn that. And it took me a good while to actually learn that this was not as easy as I thought it looked to be. And not that I'm saying it looked easy, it was actually hard to begin with. And I think that's really why you know, it does take time. These games take time because it's not just about rushing through it. It's about, and personally, I just think it's better about trying to figure out what would make the best sense, what's the most efficient. You build something, you then sit back, sip a cup of tea, have a think about it, and then you start to realize, yeah, that's not going to work. And I just think games like that, where you basically have a designer's easel in front of you, and you can sit and basically think, right, does that work? Is it going to make sense? Is it going to do what I need it to? I just love, and I think they are just wonderful. And I think when it comes to certainly trying to build something that's efficient, it's going to take some time. And I think you could really spend days making this more efficient. In the next video, I'll show you what I've built, which is the next platform, because this is the learning point. What you see here is me learning that you crush things, you turn them into ice, you turn them into carbon, and then you have to then turn those, in this case, into space packs, which again, that's useful. Now, what we also need to do is turn iron. We have to crush the iron into iron ore and then smelt it into an iron plate. And then that also goes into the booby milk production. And so you have to think about kind of 3 different moving parts there, how to make that work best. I'm not particularly happy with this particular setup, so we changed it quite a lot. But I do love the idea that you have that ability to have multiple bases, multiple platforms, even mining ships or rigs that will disappear into the ether, go and do something, then come back. I love that thought. Because when you travel, you get an awful lot of materials coming your way. So a smart player would see that as a huge benefit, to fly somewhere and then fly back and then drop that load, that cargo back. And I love it. So there we go. So I think this is going to definitely be a game I play. I hope you enjoy it. If not, give it a chance. If you've never played it, my goodness, you need to. And I would say wait until the Steam sale, because currently Space Age is £30. That's quite expensive, but for me, worth it. But I think if you're completely new to the game, maybe see if you can pick up the original Factorio without this new mod, because that game alone is totally worth playing. And I think we're going to have some fun playing this game, and hope you agree to. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you next time.